Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video.
I always thought I would have to deal with family drama on my wedding day, but didn't think it would get this toxic and problematic. At the very least, I certainly wasn't expecting lawyers and the court to get involved. But the things we do for love, right? My husband and I have been together for years, and we decided to take the next step and tie the knot. But there was one problem: my sister in law and mother in law. From the moment my husband and I started dating, my sister in law and mother in law made it clear that they didn't approve of our relationship. They thought I wasn't good enough for their son, brother, and they never missed an opportunity to let me know it. They would constantly make snide remarks about my family and me, and they would try to turn my husband against me. I tried my best to make peace with them, but it always felt like they were looking for a reason to pick a fight. I think their problem is that I'm from a completely different financial background from theirs. My mom is stay-at-home mom and my dad works as a cashier, so yeah, we're far from rich. Things are completely different from my husband. His mom comes from money and his dad is a successful lawyer. When I first met his parents, I was completely intimidated. I tried to look my best and did everything I could to gain their approval. They weren't directly mean or something, but I could tell that they thought I wasn't good enough for their family. I was really upset when I got back and my sweet husband tried his best to make me feel better. I am lucky to be able to say he has been on my side since day one, and the only reason I could bear with my sister-in-law and mother-in-law is that I've had his support. When my husband and I got engaged, I knew that my sister-in-law and mother-in-law would make our lives even more difficult. I tried my best to ignore them and focus on planning our wedding, but they always lurked in the background, trying to ruin things for us. One of the most important parts of my day was my wedding dress. I had dreamed of thrifting the perfect dress since I was a little girl, and after lots and lots of searching, I had finally found it. It was a beautiful flowing gown that made me feel like a princess. I got it altered to my size and it fit me like a dream. I was so excited to wear it on my special day. However, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law had other plans. Ever since they found out that I planned on wearing a thrifted dress, they made their disapproval pretty obvious. To make matters worse, my sister-in-law got married around 6 months ago, so both of them kept saying how it wouldn't be a good look for me to wear an old dress after sister-in-law had walked down the aisle in something designer. I tried to be as polite as possible and told them that I couldn't afford a dress as expensive as her gown, and that whatever dress I ended up choosing obviously wouldn't look old and ratty. I didn't give them the scope to argue with me. I was happy with the second-hand dress, and my husband didn't care at all about what I wore. When I told him about what mother-in-law and sister-in-law said, he told me I could walk down the aisle in jeans and he'd be just as happy to marry me. He then also told my mother-in-law not to bother me about the dress. I thought that would be it, but I guess they had other plans in mind. My wedding was quite small because that's what both my husband and I wanted. Our family, a few close friends, a few of our co-workers that we were close to, were the only people invited. My husband had more people on his side because his parents insisted that some of his extended family members must be invited. I was fine with that. Since we were saving so much money on the food and my wedding dress, we decided to splurge a bit on the photographer and the videographer to have our wedding tape. I have always thought that that was a cute idea and was excited about being able to afford it. Before the wedding, the photographer was taking pictures of the bridal party in our fancy satin robes in the back of the venue. We had an amazing time drinking champagne and laughing together. The videographer was a little late as well, so we thought of just getting the shots done. The videographer arrived just as we were almost done with the shot, so we told her to go to the dressing room and set up all the equipment because I was about to start getting ready and wanted shots of me getting my hair and makeup done. The videographer went inside, and it had barely been 5 minutes when we heard shouting. All of us ran inside wondering what happened. Inside, we saw the videographer was having a full-on fight with my mother-in-law. When they saw me, the videographer told me that she had walked in on my sister-in-law trying to destroy my wedding dress with a pair of scissors. And when she tried to stop her, my mother-in-law showed up and pushed her out of my dressing room. When the videographer told her that she had managed to take a picture of someone trying to destroy the wedding gown, mother-in-law tried to grab the camera, which is what led to them start fighting. And the videographer shouted for help. My mother-in-law immediately jumped to the defense, saying how it was all a miscommunication. I ignored her and ran to the dressing room. My beautiful dress was ripped to shreds. I was devastated. I couldn't believe that someone would do something so cruel as this to me on my special day. I walked out in tears. My husband and his groomsmen had heard the commotion and gathered there. He saw me crying and asked me what happened, and I broke down in tears telling him about my dress. The videographer told him what had happened and showed him the picture of my sister-in-law with the wedding dress. He was furious and got into a huge argument with them and told them both to leave immediately and never contact us again. Both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law created a huge fuss and accused him of choosing me over his own family, and said that the only reason they did what they did was so I didn't embarrass their whole family wearing a ratty old dress. This just made my husband angrier. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were kicked out of the venue, and my father-in-law and brother-in-law chose to follow them. Meanwhile, I had to walk down the aisle in an ordinary white dress, and my bridesmaids had to buy from a mall nearby. It looked nothing like a wedding dress, but it was the only full-length white dress they could find in my size. So we had no other option. In the end, it didn't end up looking too bad with the veil and everything. During the reception, my husband's family asked about my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and sister-in-law, and I decided to confront my sister-in-law and mother-in-law. I nervously looked at my husband, wondering what he would say. A part of me was scared that he would try to cover up what had happened. But my lovely husband flat out told him what happened. H would tell anyone who asked because, in his own words, everyone deserved to know what an awful thing his family did. After the wedding, he promised me that I would never have to see any of them again, and apologized again and again for what happened. He told me that we can find another dress I love and have a photo shoot if I want it. It's so sweet, but I told him that it's all right and I don't even care about the pictures. I'm just happy to have him as my husband against all our problems. My mother-in-law has been spamming my husband's phone, trying to contact him, but he refused to answer any calls or texts. But something completely shocking happened today. I was at work when my husband heard the doorbell ring. He went to see who it is, and a man was waiting. He introduced himself as my mother-in-law's lawyer and said that he was there to serve me papers for a court summons. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law are suing me for defamation. My husband immediately called me and asked me to come home ASAP. I came back and he told me all about it. We're thinking of what to do. I mean, it's ridiculous and there's no way any court will take her seriously. But we want to think of something that'll sort this whole thing out without getting lawyers involved, because we don't want to spend a single cent on this rubbish. And biggest of all, I have literal proof of what she did, so it's not like her case will stand. I am definitely considering suing her for damaging my property. Update 1. I wanted to thank everyone for their incredible support and advice. The overwhelming response to my original post gave me the courage to stand up for myself against my sister-in-law and mother-in-law. My husband and I decided to file a police report and press charges against them for the attempted destruction of property. I wish it didn't have to come to this, and my husband did try to convince them to settle things out of court, because it was obvious to anyone with half a brain that their case won't stand a chance in court, but oh well, their loss. Update 2. I'm happy to report that justice was served and my sister-in-law and mother-in-law have to pay for the damages to my dress. The case didn't even go to trial, actually, because our wonderful lawyer proved that it was a frivolous lawsuit through something called a demurral. The icing on the cake was that the judge put out a sanction for them to pay our legal fees. I love how the joke is now on them. Sadly, it had to come to this, but I'm glad that my husband and I stood up for ourselves and didn't let them get away with their toxic behavior. Update 3. I can't believe I'm writing another update, but my mother-in-law refuses to accept defeat. This morning she made an insanely dramatic post on Facebook with all kinds of lies about how I've turned her son against her and my sister-in-law and forced them to pay a lot of legal fees by manipulating the true story about what happened. My husband got a call from his cousin who saw the post. They knew the truth and knew that both my husband and I have removed mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and father-in-law from all our social media profiles. I'm really glad we got to know of this. My husband is furious and has told mother-in-law that if she doesn't take the post down, she'll be the one facing a defamation lawsuit this time, and it won't be a frivolous one. My mother-in-law retorted, saying she just wants her son back and all kinds of emotional blackmail, but my husband didn't want to hear a word of it. She has thankfully taken the post down, but refuses to apologize for it. I honestly just want to leave this whole thing behind me. Your mother-in-law and sister-in-law are honestly embarrassing. I can't imagine how petty and entitled someone has to be to do what they did. And all this because you didn't want to spend a crazy amount of money on a new dress when secondhand dresses are completely acceptable and quite common too? Ridiculous. Next story. I, 30, male, am currently married to my husband, also 30, male. My husband is a very hard-working man, and I love him very much. He regularly takes business trips out of town and is always under constant stress while working. He usually leaves me in charge of taking care of his dog, which he has had for about 10 years, which I don't mind at all. I'd never want something terrible to happen to his pride and joy. While my husband was on a business trip, I noticed that his dog was becoming less responsive and active. I originally brushed it off as him just being tired, but as days went by, he hadn't even moved out of the same spot on the carpet. He didn't even get up to go use the bathroom outside or eat his meals. Every time I called his name out to get him to go somewhere, all he did was open his eyes and slightly lift his head to look at me, only to put it back down and close his eyes again. When this began to happen, I attempted to call my husband about how the dog was behaving, but I never got an answer after the first few times. The next day, I tried to call again. Still no answer. I resorted to a text message telling him I was going to take the dog to the vet the next day, and he should try to catch a flight home just in case our dog doesn't make it home after the visit. Because from what I could tell, that looked to be the route it was going. I still hadn't gotten an answer from him. I sat in the waiting room for hours, still attempting to call my husband. My urgent calls were interpreted by a veterinarian getting my attention to tell me the results of the checkup. She told me that there wasn't any health problems, but rather old age getting to him. She told me there wasn't anything they could do to get him back to 100% again, and told me that our dog probably has another week at best. I chose to put down the dog. About a week later, when my husband came home from his business trip, I had to sit him down and explain what happened. Of course, neither of us were happy to talk about it. He told me that he didn't have any signal where he was, which is why he didn't respond to any of my messages or calls at all, but told me there is no excuse as to why I should put down his dog. As I tried to explain my panic about the situation, he just began to ignore me, storming off to our room and having me sleep on the couch. He has been ignoring me for the past few days. I was only trying to help our dog, and I didn't want to wait for my husband in fear that it would be too late for us to do anything. Of course, I tried to contact him in any way I could, but I didn't want my husband to come back to our dog's corpse if he didn't make it. I feel that my decision was really the only one I could make, but my husband is not happy in the slightest, and I understand why. But there was only so much I could do without him answering me or even coming home. Am I the a-hole? NTA. Letting the dog suffer for another last week just in case your husband managed to contact you or come home would be unfair to a devoted family pet. Your husband is probably only part angry with you and also angry with himself for not being available to say goodbye. I hope he comes to his senses soon so you can both grieve together. Next story. I'm 32, female. My ex-husband, Mark, 34, male, and I have 3 children together, 2 boys and 1 girl. They're all 9 years old, triplets. Our daughter's name is Ellie, and she's always been much more sensitive than her brothers. She just behaved differently than they did, and in the beginning I dismissed it as the boys being identical and her being the fraternal triplet. But with time I realized it was more than that. Ellie was eventually diagnosed as autistic when she was 4. She's a very sweet and very quiet kid. She doesn't talk very much, and she absolutely hates too much sound. Anytime we have to go somewhere, I bring her noise-canceling headphones and a few of her favorite stim toys just in case the headphones don't help enough. Lately, when she has a meltdown, it dissolves into a panic attack, and then she'll just be completely nonverbal for a day or 2. I hate seeing her go through that, so I do everything to help her manage and avoid her triggers as much as possible. Mark thinks I coddle her too much and that my efforts to help her avoid meltdowns and sensory overloads are actually just me giving in to her tantrums. He's gotten better about that mindset since his girlfriend Marissa, 33, female, moved in with him, but sometimes he and I still argue about it. It's supposed to be his week with the kids, so I was just at home catching up, cleaning, when one of my sons called me on Marissa's cell. He said that Ellie had shut herself in her closet and was refusing to come out and that their dad was getting upset with her about it. I asked him to put his dad on the phone. Mark immediately started telling me that he could handle Ellie's fits and that our son shouldn't have grabbed Marissa's phone to call me. But I told him that I at least wanted to talk about what had triggered Ellie to begin with, and I wanted to talk to her as well just to see if she was okay. He said Ellie was refusing to talk and that he'd call me back when she decided to start speaking again. As soon as he hung up on me, I grabbed my keys and drove over to his house. Marissa let me in, and I went upstairs where he was lecturing Ellie through the door, and I could hear her sniffling. Mark looked pissed to see me, but the boys were standing there, so he didn't say anything about it. Eventually, I got Ellie to come out of the closet, and she burst into tears and begged me to take her home. She wouldn't let go of my hand and didn't want to go anywhere near her dad. I knew that she'd probably lock herself away again if I left without her, so I told Mark that if she was feeling better in the morning, I'd bring her back. He texted me a few times after we left, saying I ruined his time with Ellie and the reason she hates it over there is because I always come to her rescue. I told my mom about it, and she thinks I shouldn't interfere with the kids when they're with their dad, even if there's an issue, because I'd hate it if he did the same thing to me. Edit. I have spoken to my ex since last night, and I suggested he accompany me to Ellie's next appointment with her therapist so we can talk about how to better handle these situations. He's agreed to that, so I feel as though that's a start. This post wasn't necessarily about my divorce, lack thereof, but no. I don't know why he hasn't signed the papers. He and Marissa were having an affair for 2 years before I found out. He and I have been separated for a year, and she's since moved in with him. I assumed he'd be more than okay with signing the papers, given the circumstances. But he's been reluctant to do it, and I've given up on asking why. I'm also looking into getting a lawyer to talk about custody involving all 3 of the kids. I want them all to have a good relationship with their dad, but I know my sons wouldn't be on board with an arrangement where they didn't get to be with their sister. Edit 2. I said it in a comment, but I wanted to add here that Ellie has always liked sitting in quiet, dark spaces. Sitting in her closet isn't new behavior or anything she necessarily does out of distress. She does it because she likes it and she feels comfortable in there. I also wanted to add that the situation was caused by Mark not wanting her to wear her headphones at the dinner table because he found it disrespectful, but she just couldn't handle all of the sounds she was hearing, so she went to her closet to sit. Mark was upset that she up and left like that. NTA. Your ex is actively harming your kid. He is the one ruining his time with Ellie. This seems like something to bring up with the court. It sounds like it's time for the custody situation to be changed. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.